Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Stalker 2. Stalker 2 is a game that I have a lot to say about. It's a game that I quite frankly love parts of and hate other parts of. And we're just going to talk a little bit about it today. To give you my background on Stalker, I have 100%ed Stalker 2. I have all the achievements, I've seen all the endings, and I can say after 170 hours, I have a lot of things to say. One of those being that I think the world is beautiful. It is both haunting and scary at the same time. I think the way that the world is set up, the way things are placed and so on is quite frankly amazing. It brings out an really immersive atmosphere, and having to dodge anomalies, especially early on in the game where you don't really know what you're doing, can be quite tough, and it makes for a pretty hard game, especially starting out. And that's something that I think is super cool. I love the idea of you having to learn to survive in the zone, to become one with the zone. I think that is one of those things that I really enjoy about Stalker 2, and I think it does fairly well on a more new player beginner friendly environment, right? Because you can play things that have a lot more requirements to them, such as Call of Pain or Anomaly, and all of those will have higher requirements for you, in my opinion, and are a lot harder to start rather than just booting up Stalker 2. However, the world might be beautiful, and it's also populated with some enemies that sometimes are fairly similar and sometimes aren't. But one thing that never changes is that the gunplay is good. I love the way the guns feels, and I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent about it because they feel fantastic, quite frankly. There's nothing that beats the feeling of pulling out the Sledgehammer legendary shotgun, I'm not gonna spoil anything more, that shoots like a sledgehammer and hits like a truck. It is such a good weapon, and it's such a good feeling to shoot the weapons. And I think I'd say that about most of the weapons in the game, quite frankly. A lot of them just feel really good to use. The AKM is just such a solid weapon. Trophy as well, if you get that sniper, is also a really good feeling sniper. Like, the weapons feel good. And the fact that there's so much customization you can do on the weapon means that you can almost make it into whatever you want it to be, right? Put a scope on your handgun? Yeah, sure, slap the bitch on. Do you want to put an extra little mag on it? Yeah, go ahead. This is not the level of Tarkov, but it is getting there. Like, it is closer to Tarkov than it is to not having attachments. And I think it's nice to see it. It's something that I always appreciate when I can sort of have a build a gun type of scenario. And while we are not on the level of Tarkov yet, I hope that one day I can see a game that could bring that into it, because it is really cool to do. It's one of those things that I just love to be able to go into all the details of, and like, oh yeah, I want a silence on it because this and then I want the scope, and I want an extra mag, and I want a better grip, you know. Let me fuck around with my guns, and Stalker 2 lets me fuck around with my guns, and I appreciate that immensely. And it's not just that it lets me fuck around with my guns, it's that I feel like it actually matters whether or not I fuck around with my guns. Because at times, especially if you're starting out and you haven't upgraded your weapons at all, and you haven't done a lot of these things, they can feel a lot worse to shoot. Because yeah, you don't have the scopes, you don't have all of these things that makes them them. And it's a nice feeling of progression when you start to see your gun change as you're building it up. And I think that's a really cool system that is in the game and works really well. And it also acts really well with the NPCs when you're going into gunfights and so on, because this game has a lot of that. And while I think the gunfights themselves, while the gunplay is good, the gunfights can be up and down and hit and miss a lot of the time, because it feels like Stalker 2 wants to have really intelligent AI, like the NPCs wants to be really intelligent, but they're just not up to standard. Quite frankly, like, we are talking to the point where, in my opinion, sometimes you just run into a slaughter trap and I just get to gun them down. And that's okay, like, it happens. It's just that they aren't, you know, these super level soldier NPCs, and they don't even stand a chance against games like Trap Gang or even the old Stalker games. But I think that's something to do with the fact that Stalker 2 was made in Unreal Engine 5 and not the original engine for Stalker games, unfortunately, in my opinion. I think that's a bad thing, right? Because if they could have made these scripts to be more immersive, to make the NPCs and enemies feel more human, that would have made for a much better game. I would have loved to see more tactical approaches to gunfights from the enemy's perspective, not just walking in a line or like going behind cover to shoot me, or glitching out while they're behind cover, which happened more often than it should have. It's just that I don't know, it's not my cup of tea the way NPCs act in it. It reminds me way too much, and honestly to an uncanny degree, of things such as Far Cry, which is such a basic shooter military game that I don't know, man. It's a fine game, but I just wish we had come further than just this level of intelligence on enemy in spawns and stuff. Speaking of spawns, when I started playing, there was this funny issue that you might have also experienced if you played Cyberpunk, where the enemies, very much like the police in Cyberpunk, would spawn directly in front of me or directly behind me, all of the fucking time. That has to be the most annoying thing I've experienced. Nothing is worse than trying to transport weapons from one spot to another and then having 3 fucking bloodsuckers spawn directly on top of me, time and time again. And it was always on chemical plant for some reason. It's just, that was an annoying bug. It has been fixed now, but I think it's worth mentioning that that was a thing. Which brings us into something that is kinda hard to talk about. Hi, it's me, the man behind the camera. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the environment Stalker 2 was made in. Because I think it's important to mention that Stalker 2 is one of the few games I've played that's been made during an active war. And I think it explains a lot of the issues I have with the game, primarily performance and bugs. Of course, it is gonna be much harder to push out a quality level up-to-date product during a war. I think the fact that they even managed to push out a game, let alone that it's actually a fairly well written game, the gameplay, like gameplay to gameplay moments are fairly good, is super impressive. And I think that has to be mentioned before I start talking about performance. And of course, since Stalker 2 has been developed during the war in Ukraine, I have left a link to the relief fund that GSC, the people behind Stalker, at least use on their website. So if you want to check that out, if you have the money and means to go and support, I suggest you do so. And yeah, that's about it. Back to the video. And talking about bugs, I want to make it clear, when I say performance issues, I mean straight up crashes and unbelievable lag. I also have to say that the bugs I'm talking about aren't just the simple enemy not spawning or something, they are mission breaking, main mission breaking even bugs. I had a mission, it's the second final mission of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R quest line, which in the patch of 1.0.2 would completely break. It just wouldn't fucking work. You couldn't finish it. When one of the NPCs is supposed to walk over some water, he just never walks. You can't follow him because he never walks. To finish the mission, I had to download UE tools, which is basically the command console, and activate no-clip, and no-clip my way over the water, and then try to sort of mess around enough until the point where the game recognized that I had gone over the water and eventually allowed me to complete the mission, which is what I did. I think that's a really annoying bug. I think bugs like that just aren't acceptable. I think they're super fucking annoying. Like I said, it's understandable why they're there. But I also think if people hear that and they decide that Stalker isn't the game for them, you know, that makes sense. Pause. There's a new patch that just launched. I've redone this segment of the video because, quite frankly, it's fixed a lot of the issues that I was gonna bring up. But mainly, it's also fixed the issue that I've left in the video, that being the entire segment of the S.T.A.L.K.E.R questline breaking. It's fixed as far as I can tell. It's great. I think that's awesome. We need more of that. I think it's really cool that it's finally been fixed. It's something that I really am happy with because the stories are really well written. Honestly, all of the storylines are super well written, even the Ward one, which is the one that I personally prefer not to pick. I think Ward is still really well written. It's a super interesting story regardless of the faction you choose. And now that you can finally experience it without really having the missions fail on you, that is bound to give you some more satisfaction while playing it. And I think that's awesome. It's a really cool storyline that I really, if you're playing this game, I'm just gonna say it, just don't go with either Spark or the Ward. You will get a third option eventually. And that one, in my opinion, has the coolest fucking ending out of all of them. The secret ending to this game, fantastic. Chef Kiss makes the zone feel right at home. It is the Stalker vibe that I always knew and I always loved, and I want more of that. Bittersweet, love it now. That being said, I will leave you back at the video. Stalker also has all of the anomalies. Anomalies are essentially, if you don't know, these effects that can be underground, or maybe it's the bubble flying in the air. Essentially just these weird unexplainable things, and they are all kind of cool. in my opinion, even though some of them are fairly simplistic, such as Poison Mist or Poison Ground or Poison Ground but it's blue, it's the sparkling. There's also the Fire Ground and so on, but they all have their own little unique gameplay gimmick, and I think they're fine. I think my main issue with anomalies are artifacts, because I decided, and that is on me, to 100% this game before making a video about it, which means that I've done all the achievements in the game, and one of those is collect all artifacts. Now, that doesn't sound so bad when you're thinking about it. That is until you realize that artifact spawns are complete RNG, meaning that other than 4 artifacts, the rest of them are probably gonna be up to Lady Luck for you to get. Because there are 4 that are legendary artifacts, and those legendary artifacts are super cool. They're also super unique to get. It isn't just walking into a poison field and finding it. It is dodging a tornado. It is walking inside the eye of the storm to find this giant fucking bolt that does some stuff. I don't really know. I never used them. Unfortunately, a lot of them also kind of whatever, because they aren't really well described. There's only one that I tended to use always, and it was this ball that just literally made me take less damage. I think that was kind of invulnerable. That was cool. I liked that a lot. But like the rest of them I never used, despite the fact that obtaining them was honestly some of the most memorable parts of the game. I really wish there was some bigger emphasis on more unique experiences like that, because that in entirety, like as a thing, is so much more fun than having to repeat the same 4 things over and over and over. And eventually, once you have enough artifacts, because they can be sold for quite a lot, you stop caring about whether or not your armor get damaged. You just run straight through the field and pick them up. Is that something most people would experience? Probably not. And that is because I decided to 100% it, so I needed to get all of them. Now, to give you an idea of how long that actually took, I think I could have halved my game time, having about 70 hours in the game as of now, if I hadn't decided to do that. If I just went for all the endings and that's it. It is honestly so painfully long that it made me dislike parts of the game, and that is on me for doing. That is not saying that the game is bad. It is just a fair warning that I really don't like that system a whole lot, and maybe I am colored by my experiences with that, but I doubt it. I think it is much more likely that it is just not a fun system, because it quite frankly removes that exploration thing that I really like doing in Stalker, and instead completely encourages just repeating farming them. It is not fun. I don't like that a whole lot, and the fact that I have to wait 3 in-game days for an emission to spawn or more, just see, it seems a little bit ridiculous. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I wasn't a big fan of it. It was just my personal gripe, and it's my personal biggest gripe other than the bugs, because quite frankly, Stalker in and of itself is really fun, and it's a really good game. And even more than that, it has not just a really good story, voice acting and so on, it also has some pretty fun gameplay mechanics. I really, like I said, love the gun porn, and I love all of these elements of Stalker. It's just a shame that they sort of ended up for me taking a back seat to collecting artifacts, because I decided to go for an achievement that was kind of dumb and on me. Lastly, I want to talk about the immersion of the game, because one of the things that I really liked about the old Stalker games, and Anomaly and Gamma and Call of Pain, is that they are really immersive games. The thing with Stalker 2 is that it is mostly an immersive game. I think if you're going from mission to mission, you will actually be quite immersed in the world. At least I was while playing. My thing that would almost constantly pull me back to reality is with radiation. Because the way radiation in this game works, it's kind of stupid, I'm not gonna lie. You walk into the radiation field, you hear the Geiger counter tick, and you get film grain on the sides of your screen until it eventually kills you. Like you start losing a little bit of HP, then a little bit more, and then eventually you're dead. There is no gas mask, there's no metro thing where you can put in your mask or anything like that. I think that's really disappointing. Quite frankly, I don't think that's very fun. I think the fact that it just puts some flimmer at the edges of my screen is really, really annoying. I have yet to see any other game that does it like that. I would at that point much rather just not have any effect and then just let me lose a little bit of HP or some shit like in Fallout. Right? Like, at that point, just don't bother. Like, it doesn't have to be there. It doesn't need it. And I think it is something that will continue, like, pull me out. It'll just be like, oh, you're immersed? Yeah. get a little bit of radiation out with you, and it's really annoying. It's just not a whole lot of fun to have to deal with that, and I think that's a quite easy me problem. Like, that is on probably a very specific issue to me. I haven't heard other people really complain a lot about that, and that's okay. It's just, in my opinion, that was kind of annoying and kind of dumb. Like, we have gas masks. Just make me use them while I'm walking around in the radiation field, yeah? Lastly, when we're talking about immersion in Stalker, it's not that Stalker 2 isn't immersive. It is. When I'm following the quest lines, I am immersed. When I'm talking to the NPCs, I'm immersed in the game. When I'm running around the zone, exploring it for the first time, I was deeply immersed in the game. When I felt like there was danger around every corner, I was immersed. The issue with Stalker 2 is how quickly, at least for me, I also ended up becoming overpowered. And part of that is the fact that the radiation really doesn't matter. And part of it is the fact that, in my opinion at least, Stalker 2 tends to be kinda easy to predict in a lot of ways. Not only, in my opinion, are the NPCs dumber than they were in Stalker or Chernobyl, but it's also just a less dark game. And with dark, I don't mean the plot lines. They are fairly dark themselves. I mean, visually, the game is just brighter. And that's a double-edged sword, because allowing people to see more also means that you can't really have that, imagination. Your imagination isn't taken off. When you hear a sound behind you, you can turn around and almost immediately identify what it is. It isn't like the old Stalker games, in my opinion, at least for me, in my experience. Well, I would be scared. I would turn around and be like, oh. Nowadays, I can just turn around and be like, oh yeah, there was nothing. Like, there is this level of lost darkness, I'd almost want to call it, where the environment itself just isn't as scary because it's been dumped down a little bit. And I think that's a combination of a lot of things. Probably partially, like I also mentioned, the Ukrainian war did its fair share in this game, I would imagine. I would also imagine that the entirety of UE5 being a new tool for the developers to work in probably isn't as easy as working in the engine that they used to use for Stalker games. Like, there is a lot of things there that, in my opinion, probably collectively adds up to making it a lot less immersive. And the bugs definitely brought that down by a lot as well. That being said, like I said, I think Stalker 2 is close to being amazing, because it has the genes, it has the missions, it has almost everything to be a really good game. My main gripe is that immersion just isn't there as much as it could have been, and I think that's a shame. I also think that Stalker 2 is insanely impressive. Like I said, it is no small feat to be able to push out of game of Stalker 2's size, and on the level that Stalker 2 is, like in terms of quality, graphics, everything, doing a war in your country. The fact that this game exists is a miracle, and I think it is completely insane to see devs push a game like this. It is a fantastic game for what it is. Not only are you supporting a Ukrainian-based studio, which I would imagine that they also kind of need right now by buying it, but you are also, in my opinion, experiencing some of the coolest world out there while playing it, because while I've talked a lot of shit about the immersion in Stalker, the world that Stalker takes place in is insanely cool. I hope eventually to come back to Stalker 2 and be surprised with all sorts of things, maybe some crafting system, hunting, making me feel like I have to survive the zone, making the zone a lot more dangerous. I hope to see that when I return. But for now, this has been me talking about Stalker. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, just have a wonderful day ahead of you. Even if you didn't, just enjoy yourself, man. Have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one.